A woman confesses to murdering both her parents and then hiding their bodies. Virginia McCullough had been living with the bodies of her dead father, John, and her mother, Lois, for the past 4 years. This is a crime that shocked the nation. This case is truly bizarre. The wickedness, the violence, a mother and father murdered by their daughter. This is the cold, ruthless eyes and face of a killer who hid their bodies in the family home. Virginia has created a tomb out of breeze blocks covered with blankets and lived with them. That's my dad. My mom's upstairs in a wardrobe. The lengths she went to, the lies that she perpetrated to conceal their death. It was the GP's practice that started to unravel her web of lies. You don't expect your own child to turn on you, to murder you. The psychopath daughter jailed for life for murdering her parents after living with their remains for 4 years. The details of this case shock and horrify even the most experienced of murder detectives, let alone members of the public. I remember first reading it thinking this can't be real. How can someone have got away with this for so long? The murder, keeping the bodies in a house and not being caught, that blew my mind. I've been around the news business for decades. As I started to read the story, it was the most shocked that I can remember for many, many years. In September 2023, in grade 35-year-old Virginia McCullough admits to killing both her parents. So usually it's one parent that's killed. Double parricides are rare, but double parricides where there's a female perpetrator are incredibly rare, less than 1% of cases. Really, really unusual. The couple hadn't been seen or heard from since the summer of 2019. As officers handcuffed McCullough, she calmly told them they needed to know about something that they would find upstairs. They could barely believe what she told them next. "Cheryl, I thought they should talk to that guy." But how did this happen? The case begins years earlier in a seemingly normal family home. The dad is John McCullough, recently retired as a lecturer at Anglia Ruskin University. He liked golf, he liked reading, his health was, where you would expect to be in 70. The mother is Lois McCullough, who is 71, suffers from agoraphobia, but despite that she has a wide network of friends, actually around other parts of the world, not just England. Generally speaking, they appeared to be a happy couple living out their retirement. Also living at the couple's home on Pump Hill is their daughter, Virginia, who is in her early 30s. Virginia McCullough was the youngest of 5. The others had all left home and created lives for themselves. But Virginia remained at home with her parents. She didn't have a wide circle of friends, never been in regular employment. To outsiders, it appears that Virginia is acting as carer. For her aging parents, Virginia took care of the finances on behalf of the parents and looked after their banking. Her parents both had health issues, so it could be said that she was fulfilling some kind of care role for them both. They can rely on her. She stayed at home, so she will care for her elderly parents. Could it be a better picture of love from a daughter? But this caring relationship is not all that it seems. We know that Virginia lied to her parents throughout her time living there. They think she's gainfully employed as a web designer. She told them that she had a job. So there must have been some element of lifestyle deception. Did she leave the home every day? Or did she claim to work from home? She had no sources of income. All she did every day was be at home and gamble, be an online shop, and to fonder habits. Virginia isn't just managing her parents' money, she's stealing it. She was in control of their bank accounts, so she could make money essentially disappear. But with a gambling habit to feed, Virginia is soon stealing large amounts, and her parents begin to get suspicious. We know that, for example, her parents were asking questions about the money and where some of that money was going, and we know that she would be lying to her parents and saying, well, actually, something's happened. Some money's been taken from the bank, and I'm dealing with that. She says that there's a banking error, that they've been a victim of fraud, that they're entitled to compensation, and she even creates these fake documents to show them or try to prove to them that what she's saying is genuine, when in fact it was a complete lie. By the summer of 2019, Virginia's lies are wearing thin, and she has plunged the family into debt. You can only create this ruse for so long. At some point, she would have to have told her parents what was really happening. She was around $60,000 in debt. That is a lot of money. And I think it was at this point that she decided there was only one way out of this. And telling the truth wasn't going to be that way. Virginia has seen a way to silence her parents' questions once and for all, and to get access. She would have done anything to get them out of the way in order to have what she wanted. But it will involve doing the unthinkable. She left nothing to chance. If one went, the other had to. By June 2019, Virginia McCullough has decided on a plan to murder her own parents. Murder, by its very definition, has to have an element of premeditation to it. But Virginia's planning stretched over months and clearly showed just how determined she was to kill her parents. She spends months buying the necessary medication and drugs that she's going to use to poison her parents. Virginia has gathered a vast stockpile of prescription medication, including powerful sedatives. She buys implements so that she can crush those drugs into a fine powder, and she can slip into drinks for her parents. And Virginia is taking extra steps to make sure everything will go to plan. In the days and weeks before she carried out the murders, Virginia treated her parents like guinea pigs and put sample amounts, practice amounts, of medication into food and drinks. She's their principal carer, so she's looking after their food and their drinks, and she's testing to see how much it's going to take. How much will it be to be the fatal dose, as she watches how they react to the drink she supplies. Virginia was going to make sure she was successful in killing her parents, and she left absolutely nothing to chance. The kind of cold and quite calculating characteristics of this case makes it really very unusual. Parasite cases are almost always explosive incidents. This is often something that isn't planned a long way in advance. It's something that escalates, but by this stage, Virginia has actually been contemplating the murders for over 3 months, although she tells us that she'd been planning this since March 2019. I think she'd probably fantasized about them not being in her life for a very, very long time for me as a police officer. This is a new level. Someone that can plan it. Was she sitting there having dinner with them every evening and going through in her head how she was going to kill them? I mean, that just puts a complete new layer on everything. It's chilling. By the time the 17th of June came around, Virginia had practiced, done her dry run, and now was the time to murder them both. Throughout the evening, Virginia brings her parents various drinks. Unbeknownst to them, she's added a lethal combination of drugs. Virginia had prepared a concoction of prescription drugs, which she put in his Guinness and in his brandy. Virginia also put prescribed drugs in her mother's drink. Virginia sees that her father doesn't finish his drinks, and her mother has had an even smaller dose. But now she must wait, unsure if either of her parents have taken the lethal amount required. And it is then that Virginia heads to her room. She then just casually goes to bed. Really, I can't get my head around how weird that seems. What kind of person administers poison to her parents, and then climbs into bed, goes to sleep, as if it was just another day? It takes a particularly wicked kind of mind to have that attitude, I would suggest. She must have gone to that bed that night with her fingers crossed, thinking, "This is the night I will have murdered my parents." It's early morning, and Virginia wakes to see if her planning has paid off. There's only one question on her mind. Has she been successful in murdering her parents? The next morning, she got up and went into the room. Virginia first enters her father's bedroom and sees him lying on the bed, motionless. She found him dead in bed. So the first part of her plan had come to fruition. Her scheme has worked. Virginia McCullough has successfully poisoned her father, but there's a problem. When she went to her mother's room upstairs, she found her sitting up in bed. She was actually listening to the radio with her headphones on, so it would have been a surprise for Virginia to see her sitting up in bed, and she's alive and well. So the poisoning had an effect, but she didn't take enough of the poison. Virginia needs to decide what she's going to do next. Virginia later said, if one went, the other had to. And, of course, what she meant by that was that if her mother had lived, she would have found her husband dead. Her mom was doomed to die, sadly. Virginia had to put her backup plan into action. As part of her meticulous preparations, Virginia has even considered this eventuality. She puts on some gloves and moves to the next chapter of the killing. She was prepared, but it was a plan that I don't think she really wanted to execute. Virginia hesitates, approaching her mother's room multiple times, considering her next move. It's almost, perhaps, as if she was plucking up the courage. She could have had the courage to decide that she wasn't going to do it. Don't anybody be in any doubt that this woman was utterly committed to murdering both her parents. Entering the room, Virginia violently attacks her mother, repeatedly striking her head with a hammer. Her mother was staring at her in disbelief as the hammer rained down on her head. Her mom said, "What are you doing?" For someone like Virginia, it was almost a case of how dare you not die, dad died, dad took the poison. He did what he was supposed to do, didn't do that. Defense wounds later discovered on Lois's body would reveal her desperate attempts to protect herself against her frenzied daughter. What would anybody make of the mental state of the killer, who described the hammer blows that helped take a mother's life as like playing the xylophone and hitting the notes with a hammer that's taken her mother's life? I'm almost speechless. What an appalling, wicked, sick kind of metaphor to use. Astonishing. But Virginia doesn't stop there. It's roundly believed that Virginia gave up using the hammer because it was going to be too messy. She decides to use another weapon that she bought in advance. So she then went and got the knife. 8 stab wounds, 7 to the chest. She was leaving nothing to chance. The fact that she uses a knife and she stabs her mother so many times gives us indication that this is just an act. This is just something that has to be done. She can see what's happening, but the emotion behind that veil isn't actually there. It's a really awful death for the mother, who would have known that her own daughter was killing her. It's rare that we see this level of violence from women. This is a lot of pent-up resentment, a lot of pent-up, kind of maybe even rage and anger towards her parents, which has made it really much easier for her to do. According to Virginia, after brutally murdering her mother, she then sits with her on the bed and apologizes. She actually says she held her mother's hand as she dies, repeatedly saying, I'm sorry, I'm sorry." That is utter, unbelievable drivel. There's no sorrow at all on this woman's behalf. She has been plotting this for weeks and months. She's even had a dummy run. She's worked it out. She's got a backup plan. There was utterly no sorrow whatsoever. By the time neighbors are just waking up, Virginia McCullough has already successfully executed her plan to kill both her parents. But this is just the beginning. Her next steps will be critical. Confronted now by the horrors of what she's done, Virginia has to work out what happens next. Murderers usually want to create some kind of distance between the body, the evidence, and themselves. But Virginia took it to a completely different level. It's the 18th of June, 2019, in the quiet suburban village. But whilst most of her neighbors are still getting ready for work, Virginia McCullough is dealing with an unthinkable scene. In a premeditated act, she has just murdered both her parents, poisoning her father and bludgeoning her mother with a hammer, before stabbing her 8 times. Confronted now by the horrors of what she's done. But Gina has to work out what happens next, and the meticulous detail with which she planned, rehearsed, and then executed the death. That level of attention seems to have vanished, because now it becomes almost haphazard, with the bodies of her mother and father still lying dead in their beds. Her next movements will be crucial if she's to get away with it. Murderers usually want to create some kind of distance between the body, the evidence, and themselves. It's commonplace for murderers to try and cover up their tracks in the minutes, hours, days after they've committed their crimes. But Virginia took it to a completely different level. Rather than worrying about how to conceal their bodies, McCullough's first concern is about her own. During the frenzied attack on her mother, she has cut her hand. She's not looking herself at home remorseful, regretful, riddled with guilt. She went on like everything was normal. The deception begins. She goes to the local GP, shows them the injury, and obviously is asked, "How have you done that?" And she said, "Oh, I'm going to cook while I was chopping up some vegetables." And really, is the GP going to think when she turns up that that was inflicted by stabbing her mother? Would anyone in their right mind do that? With her injury taken care of, Virginia's thoughts turn to the bodies of her parents and using her father's credit card. One of the most intriguing aspects is the brazenness of what she did. She's ready to start robbing from her father before he's even cold. Then she goes off to Chelmsford Town Center, where she purchases some plastic gloves and 2 sleeping bags. This shows really how her mind works in terms of her thinking practically. She's just using what she has access to. She's using the knowledge that she has to try and make something to conceal the bodies. Back at home, these sleeping bags become her mother and father's makeshift body bags. A lifeless body is difficult to maneuver. It takes a considerable amount of effort, especially to get somebody into a sleeping bag. This was quite a physically demanding thing to do. She doesn't have long. Left undisturbed, a dead body can start to decompose within 24 hours, especially on a warm June day. It will begin to leak fluids and smell, attracting flies and potentially the attention of her neighbors. Professor Anna Williams is a forensic anthropologist and an expert in body decomposition. Whether knowingly or not, by wrapping the bodies in sleeping bags that would have absorbed a lot of decomposition fluids. By wrapping in plastic, she created a microclimate around the body that would have kept oxygen out and kept water in. Any maggots that have hatched from the eggs laid by flies would die without oxygen and therefore change the process of decomposition from then on. With step 1 complete, McCullough begins another shopping spree, buying breeze blocks, sharp sand, cement, everything she needs to hide a pair of bodies. So many murderers put their victims' bodies in places where they hoped they won't be found. She didn't throw them in a lake or a river or the sea. She didn't drive them to some remote quarry. She concealed them in the house. Suit her to keep the remains at home. If she didn't and she disposed of them somewhere else, it could have been found by someone and eventually they would work their way back to her. So by concealing them at the home, she still had control over what was happening. It shows planning, organization, and rationality. If I'm to try and take the bodies out of the house, it's going to cause more suspicion. How can I rationally get away with this crime? And how long can I get away with it for? She hides her mother Lois's corpse inside a bedroom wardrobe, sealing it shut. Then, using breeze blocks and filler, she builds a makeshift mausoleum. Her father's corpse is stashed inside and covered with at least 11 layers of plastic. She disguises it all with multiple blankets. So I'm looking at an image of John's study where Virginia has created a tomb out of breeze blocks, and it just looks like a bed. There's photographs, pictures, and items left on it. It's there in plain sight. Your parents who looked after you and supported you for all of your life. I've never seen a body ever concealed. In that kind of manner, the real lack of dignity that she afforded to the bodies, it's particularly wicked. This is not a temporary measure. Virginia McCullough plans to remain living with the bodies of her parents. The primary reason that people would move a body to another location is to remove themselves emotionally and physically from the situation. In this case, if Virginia doesn't have a need to emotionally detach because the emotional attachment wasn't there in the first place, then it seems conceivable that she was relatively comfortable with living in the home with the deceased bodies. I think what she wanted to do was forget that they existed and literally lock them away physically and lock them out of her mind. I've been a murder detective for a long time, and I've never come across anyone where they've killed someone and then tried to live. With the remains, we can't comprehend what that must be like. The idea of being in the same house or room as a decomposing body is pretty horrific from my experience of the smell, as it permeates everything. And at the beginning, in the first 24 hours, the smell of a body is not terribly offensive. It's not terribly strong. And then in about 1 to 2, maybe 3 weeks, the gases are released a lot more than it can be very smelly. It's a very characteristic offensive smell. It's greasy. It sticks to your eyelashes, to your nasal hairs. But if the body is enclosed in an area that's sealed up, then that smell will be contained. I just think Virginia must have got used to it and somehow lived with it. But Virginia doesn't live like this for weeks or even months. She shares a home with her parents' corpses for more than 4 years. She does it for one reason. The day after she committed the crimes, she went into town, had a little bit of a spending spree, and bought some jewelry. I think that for her, that shopping spree after she'd killed her parents was her version of celebrating. After being supported by her parents for most of her adult life, with them out of the way, her behavior escalates. Days after she has murdered her mother, she has applied for a credit card in her mom's name. At the same time, she's still claiming all their benefits: pension, winter fuel allowance. She is just taking everything she can while spending the money that's in their bank account. She impersonates her father and makes a phone call to his private pension company to see if she can get an early release of his funds. It becomes a bit of an obsession. She is opening bank accounts, cards, credit cards, all in their name, which probably back in the day it would be quite hard to do, but we live in a society now where you can do everything online. Everything could be done from the 4 walls of their house. And that's exactly what she did. Virginia's plan only works if people continue to believe Lois and John are alive. So she moves quickly. 2 cover-ups are underway. Cover-up of the dead bodies and cover-up to the siblings. Where have they suddenly vanished? And very soon after the murder, she's starting to send text messages. She uses her dead mom's phone to text her sibling, saying the parents are by the coast. They're alive in Walton. Virginia convinced everybody she came into contact with that her parents were still alive. This meant other family members, companies, credit card companies, and the like, the GP's practice. What about birthday cards to children, to friends, to other relatives? Pre-pint cards, you can get those, brilliant. So you don't need to see the handwriting, that's all covered. And her mother's brother, her uncle, to whom her mom was very close, she even starts sending letters to him, tries to keep him on side as if nothing happened. She's working 8, 9, 10 hours a day creating this lie, getting material to support that lie. Fraudsters are liars, essentially. That's what it boils down to. They always think they're a couple of steps ahead, and they will cover their tracks as they go. She has really thought this through. This, essentially, was her job. She relies on a regular bank of excuses, canceling her parents' appointments and putting off friends and family by claiming they're either ill or on an extended holiday. Why? Why was there never any attempt to find out what had happened to Mom and Dad? It's almost as if they fell off the face of the earth. Surely, she should have been asking herself, how long can I keep this charade up? Surely, she should have been thinking, well, this lie, this deceit can't carry on forever. In March 2020, fate brings a stroke of luck. Good evening. The coronavirus is the biggest threat this country has faced for decades. An event Virginia couldn't have expected, one that gives her a huge advantage: to stay at home, protect our NHS, and save lives. COVID-19 forces the entire country into lockdown. This pandemic created this perfect cover for her. People were not allowed to leave their houses. They weren't allowed to socialize. It seems so surreal now, but that was the reality. She must have thought that all her cards had come up once, and that she was suddenly in a bed of roses, and it bought her probably many precious months to continue the lies. Virginia maintains her complex web of deceit even after lockdown ends using different SIM cards. She sends regular text messages to her parents, friends, and family, and even impersonates her mother on a call to one of her own siblings. Takes quite an exceptional level of, cognitive skill and ability to be able to keep up with a string of lies over a period of time. I think, quite honestly, she would have gone on for as long as she could have. And yet that's a very taxing, very tiring way to live. It's really tiring to have to fill in forms and pretend to be somebody else, to text family members and say, "It's Mom." Virginia's behavior becomes increasingly bizarre. It's thought she makes more than 200 calls to the police about a variety of trivial matters. She has the audacity to ring the police pretending to be her mother. That is part and parcel with the fraudsters I deal with, who think they are above everything. They think they're clever. They like being one up on other people. Even stranger, in August 2023, she calls police to allege an assault, in which she was reported to be the victim. This leads them to visit the house. It's a high-risk strategy. Why make up an allegation of assault when you don't need to? You don't need to have police turning up at the address. So why did she do that? Was she bored? Did she want to move it to a new level? Did she want to get some bizarre level of excitement or thrill? Did she want to almost make the police look stupid? Nothing ever came of this allegation. Nobody was arrested. Nobody was charged. It makes no sense to me whatsoever to make an allegation of assault to the police when you've got the decomposing, rotting, dead bodies of your two parents hidden in the house. We'll probably never know why she decides to play this risky game. And for now, she escapes suspicion. But time is running out. Soon, one misstep will end her deception, once and for all. The fact that they were forced entry would make me believe they knew that they were going there to arrest a murderer. They were taking no chances. I strongly suspect they thought there may be hidden secrets in there. September 2023. John and Lois McCullough have been dead for more than 4 years. Their bodies are still inside the family home, and the only person who knows they are there is their daughter, Virginia. I've lived with those remains every day for that 4 years and 3 months, with all of the ramifications of that. Even with my professional head as an ex-detective, I have no comprehension as to how she managed that, or thought that that was going to be the right thing to do. But after successfully carrying out years of deception, convincing the world her parents are still alive, everything is about to come crashing down. It was the GP's practice that really started to unravel her web of lies and murderous deceit. They were very concerned that they hadn't seen her parents for some years. Prescriptions were no longer being collected. Suspicions were being raised. Cracks were beginning to show. The end was nigh. The GP is concerned because every time that they've made an appointment to see both parents, they've either been canceled or they've been told that they're not well. When that situation occurs for a GP, they have to ask themselves certain questions. Do we need to inform someone because this is out of character? And at some point, the JP was that concerned that he obviously contacted the safeguarding unit, and they subsequently then contacted the police. A missing persons inquiry is launched. The police acted extremely quickly. In that small window, it has gone from a missing person to murder. The police clearly knew or strongly suspected that something was not right, because when they crashed through the door, They were already wearing forensic suits, which is very unusual. If you were just doing a welfare check on someone, you'd go in regular uniform or even plain clothes and knock on the door. This was very different. It's the police.
Got it.
Stay where you are. Stay where you are. But how does a simple welfare check become a murder inquiry? I suspect that in the background they did a lot of discreet police inquiries. They would have looked at cell site analysis and thought, hang on, she's saying they've left the home for holiday, but their phones are still at the address. They could have looked into the spending on the bank accounts and seen maybe this isn't consistent with their spending. They could have spoken to other family members during that time and said, well, have you seen them? Whatever police have uncovered in the background is enough to obtain a warrant and place Virginia immediately under arrest. It started as a missing person inquiry from a police perspective, but when Virginia is arrested at the scene, she's arrested for suspicion of murder. I'll show you signs.
Yeah.
Ginny?
Yeah.
Ginny?
Oh.
The time is 12. 12. You're under arrest for suspicion of murder against Jonathan McCullough and Laura McCullough.
Okay.
Do you not say anything but it may home defense mention? I take my one question, so I just want anything to do, so. Okay.
All right.
Your arrest is necessary. Alfro, is there anything in Pop we should know about? Can I take you to it?
No, you can sell me.
Can we go in there for a second so I can tell you something? Yeah. No two people have ever arrested have ever been the same in how they react to it. But that is unusual. She's very compliant. Most people, if you go and arrest her for murder, they'll say, what are you talking about? Who, what, when, where, why? She seemed to have accepted it straight away. This case has been described rather bizarrely as both complex and straightforward. I'll put it this way. You didn't have to be Sherlock Holmes to figure it out. So it was straightforward. There was a full and frank confession virtually the minute the police crashed through her door. My dad's body's in there. Right, okay. Yep, okay. Obviously I'll say, what about your arm? A little bit more complicated. Okay. What stands out is that the matter-of-fact way that she deals with the police. She's been rumbled. The game is up. The 4-year lie. The web of deception. It's all over. And yet her voice is emotionless. She might as well have been reading the yellow pages. Where will we find your mom? Okay. So upstairs there are about 5 wardrobes. Yep. It's behind the bed, but back next to the sink. It's the second one. I've been to jobs where we're asking for various items. They'll say all my accountancy books are upstairs, 3rd drawer down, and we go up there and we do it. And that's talking about paperwork. She is describing where her parents are dead in the house, as if they are paperwork. Such a fascinating response. She's clearly expecting this, on some level. What you see is what appears to be a calm composure. It's a little bit more than that. This is someone who's used to acting. This is someone who's used to feeling uncomfortable around people, and so is used to putting on a facade. I did know that this would kind of come eventually, and it's proper that I serve my punishment.
So yeah.
Are you happy to sign that? To say that it's a true account? Yeah. Here they are, shortly after entering the home, getting a full and frank admission to not 1, but 2 murders of her parents by Virginia. In all my years of policing, I have never before seen a confession that is so thorough and so detailed. I think she's quite enjoying the attention that she's getting here. She actually quite likes the fact that the police are there. And now she gets to tell her story and have someone listen to her for a change. It also reflects a mismatch with reality in terms of the seriousness and the gravity of the crime. To be able to talk about it in such a matter-of-fact way. Cheryl, I thought they should put the bad guy. I've just woken up today and done my job. He's not alive. I'm not going to comment on anything. It's not my job to comment on it, okay? Because I've got to be impartial with everything, okay? So, I'm not going to give any comments. This is the cold ruthless eyes and face of a killer. The shocking police body cam also captures Virginia's detailed descriptions of how she murdered her parents. I've slipped a pile of those into his drink. There were about 2 or 3 drinks that I brought downstairs. When she's back at the police station, Virginia then goes on to describe what she calls the most grisly detail, and that is the hammer still covered in blood. So, next bit is very hard to talk about. That's probably the most grisly detail. So on the ground floor underneath the stairs, there's a few like storage boxes and things. And in the middle, I think it sits in one of the boxes or in a bag or something. If you want me to shush after this, it's fine. But every bit helps. You will find the recipe is helpful. There's a hammer. I know. I'm trying to help to find everything. It's in the middle, underneath the stairs. It will still have blood on it. It's rusted, but it will still have blood traces on it. There's still a weapon under the stairs. It would still have blood on it. I mean, it's a really bizarre one. I mean, people tend to kill people and immediately get rid of them out of the weapon, but she chose to keep it for what? I don't guess. Mind-blowing. But the murder confessions are not the only crimes Virginia McCullough admits to. Virginia cannot stop talking. She tells the same police officer that there's a bank card and some cash in a bag, and she wants to confess to the fraud that she's been committing. Also in the handbag as well, there's, and again, because you're probably going to need to know about it, there's a card in there, won money, and that's bank card, where, there's, a lot of transactions have taken place. I've lost a few years.
What?
From money that pertains to my parents. The murders was quite straightforward, as it can be for that type of incident. But the financial side would have been a little bit more complicated because Virginia was actually committing fraud and theft and deception from her parents, as well as the bank and institutions. He's just openly admitted to committing this financial fraud for at least 4 years. Just so blasé about it. Virginia tells police she has defrauded her parents over the years, spending money from credit cards, bank accounts, pensions, and benefits that were all in their names. So in total, over a 4-year period, she took $150,000 from her parents in multiple means. The money has all gone. One large chunk of it frittered away. We know she gambled around $21,000. Police are aware of. She online shopped, clothing, jewelry, but nothing about it was extravagant. She didn't live this extravagant lifestyle that one would expect a fraudster to live. And again, this is extremely common. I very rarely go through the door of fraudsters' addresses, and they are living this life of luxury because people don't really understand what it takes to live this life and how much it actually costs. Police know the extent of Virginia McCullough's crimes, but this case still has unanswered questions. When you look back at this case, one of the most standout features is that it came to the family doctor to raise the alarm. It's not as if the killer was an only child. She's got 4 siblings. One word, question, why? And with a full and frank confession already obtained, what will the consequences be for a woman who could commit such unthinkable acts? From the court's perspective, if you can prove premeditation, then that's going to be your aim. I'm sure Virginia's watched plenty of true crime on television, but she didn't really pay very close attention because by concealing the bodies in the home, it was obvious. She would always be convicted of those murders, no matter what October. 2024 Virginia McCullough attends Chelmsford Crown Court to be sentenced for the murder of her parents. She pleaded guilty to both murders. She didn't really have much of a choice. We're at a trial, which is just a trial now for sentencing. We know her guilt. She's admitted her guilt. So there would be no trial. You don't need jury members to define her guilt because she's admitted to it. So essentially you go straight to sentencing at that point. The facts are read out from the prosecution and then from the defense team. And then the judge makes the decision. And the question then for the judge was, what was the sentencing going to be? Was it going to be a life sentence, which meant she was going to spend the rest of her life in prison, or was there going to be a minimum term that she would serve? The packed courtroom hears the motivation behind Virginia's crimes. So what drove this killer? Well, you won't be surprised at what drives a lot of killers is cash. I mean, the judge summed up fantastically. All she cared about was money. In the 8 years that I've been investigating financial abuse, I have seen people exploiting family members financially. But to this level for this result, as part of the sentencing, the judge considers Virginia's psychological evaluations. When adults commit parricide, the component that's found time and time again as a mental health implication of some sort, Virginia was assessed by a psychiatrist, and there was mention of several mental health difficulties and neurodiversity. So there was psychopathic tendencies, acute psychosis, autism, personality disorders, and mild depression. Having taken into account those various different mental health diagnoses, the judge concluded that in this case, there was no impairment of the ability for Virginia to understand what she was doing. Even though although the judge didn't see her mental health problems as legally causative, she's obviously a young woman with a catalog of problems and difficulties and issues. Although she was not formally diagnosed with a personality disorder in the way that it had any impact on her conviction and her sentencing, what is very evident are the traits that come through in terms of elements of antisocial personality disorder and, in particular, psychopathy. The lying, the deception. The fact that it was very cunning, very controlled, and she was a predator in terms of how she went about committing the crime. Personally, I think anyone that can kill their own flesh and blood is a risk to anyone. You're killing someone that has loved you no matter what, that have supported you. If you can murder someone so close to you, you're capable of anything. The judge sentences Virginia to life, with a minimum term of 36 years before she can be considered for release from prison. She is an intelligent manipulator who chose to kill her parents callously without a thought for them or those who continue to suffer as a result of their loss. This process, from the finding of John and Lois's remains to the unraveling of McCullough's web of lies, has taken a huge toll on the wider family network. She was given a minimum tariff of 36 years. And that's actually very high. Usually the tariff for a life sentence is around 15 to 30 years. But there were circumstances here that the judge pointed to of the calculated planning, the hiding of the bodies afterwards, and the fact that she killed 2 parents. She will be well into her 70s before she even becomes eligible for parole. And it's far from guaranteed that that will ever be granted. Virginia will be at the age that she killed her parents when her minimum term is over, which is quite chilling. Virginia is finally behind bars. But this shocking case has left lingering questions. Chief among them, how did this tragedy go undetected for so long? Her actions have impacted on lots of people. First and foremost, Mom and Dad, but also family members, the GP, because there'll be lots of people who will be thinking, could we have done something at some point to have prevented what was happening? There's probably a family racked now with remorse. Why did we not do more when we didn't hear from Mom and Dad, or they didn't see their grandchildren for a number of years? Why was it left to the family doctor to blow the whistle? They have been left utterly devastated by the circumstances of this case. And they continue to feel the loss of John and Lois each and every day. It's not just the 3 lives that we've discussed, of course, that have been changed. The 2 people who've been murdered and the murderer. There's a whole family now that have to come to terms. Their grandchildren. A family that we were told was very close. That they used to joke, they used to delight in their grandchildren. As she sits in prison, her mother and father are dead. She's responsible for that, but she's now taken those people away from extended family, from her siblings. We hope that when people go to prison for something as serious, certainly as Virginia has committed, that it gives them more time to think about what they've done, that they feel remorseful. I don't think she's capable of that depth of feeling. There is nothing human about her. It is vile, it is scary, and it is dangerous.